Because nobody's like you.
Okay, so for your miniature voice and breathing lesson, because we want to get you speaking in your authentic voice, I wanted to show you this diagram of the cycle of breath-based vocalization. Now, this is the foundation of all the training I received through the Transformational Voice Institute. Hopefully you can see this diagram well enough to see that there is a cycle here, starting with posture, and then moving to inhalation, then to onsets, sustaining, and release. Now, if you were working with me as an individual voice student or we were in a class together, we'd work more on the sustaining and release part. But for our purposes today, which is all about speaking your authentic voice, we are simply going to focus on these 4 elements: posture, onsets, resonance, and pitch. But before we get into that, I really need to talk to you a little bit about the rib cage and the belly flop. So let's start with the ribs and the intercostal muscles, which are between the ribs. Now, the intercostal muscles are the only muscles in the body that stretch every which way like spandex, okay? So this cycle of transformation of breath-based vocalization really begins with the rib cage. And the thing is, you want to have those ribs nice and out and expanded, but at the same time, you want your belly to be relaxed and to be breathing on the breath through the belly. Now, this is a process that is actually normal to babies. Now, if you take a newborn baby and you lay that baby in the crib at night and it wakes up in the middle of the night and it starts to cry and you can hear it 3 doors away and down the stairs and across the hall and every which way, it's because this is the way that our bodies really naturally want us to breathe. That nice relaxed belly going up and down with the inhalation and the exhalation. But see, this is the thing about socialization. A lot of us spend way too much time trying to look thinner than we are. I mean, I, for one, walking around that swimming pool in a swimsuit during the summer, what are you doing? You're sucking in your belly, right? You're tightening, you're clenching those abdominal muscles. So in order to take advantage of the cycle of breath-based vocalization, you basically have to unlearn all that stuff, okay? Now, if I had you as a voice student in my home studio sitting by the keyboard, what I would do is I would pull out a yoga mat, I'd lay it on the floor, and I would have you lay down. So you might want to actually think about doing that when we're done with this lesson. Actually get out a yoga mat or just lay on the floor without one, because gravity really helps us throughout this process, okay? So it would go like this. You lay down on the floor and you take one quick, what we call get skinny, and that is actually you do pull in that belly so that the rib cage expands and goes out and those intercostal muscles are doing their thing, right? Now, I often call it the handlebars. Hopefully you can see a little bit of this here and see how the rib cage is expanded. Now, at this point, what I would suggest is that you actually drop the rib cage. Allow it to collapse like that. And this way, when you get skinny, pull in that belly and the rib cage goes out, you can feel how it feels when it's expanded. For me, it's a nice stretchy feeling right here. It just feels, it feels relaxed, but it also feels nice and supported. So collapse the rib cage again, feel that, and then get skinny, expand it, and see how that feels. Now remember this feeling. So as you were laying down on the floor in my studio with your rib cage out, as you breathe in, the belly should move up. And then as you exhale, the belly comes down. Just try this a few times. Lay down on the floor with those ribs out, belly up. It's like that. So that is how you want this process to work when you're in the process of proper breath-based vocalization. And let me tell you, because of those years of abdominal clenching that most of us have done, it's not necessarily easy to put this into muscle memory. It literally can take years or at least months, okay? Now, what I used to do when I was in the training and just learning this process, which by now has become pretty much second nature, but I would make a point every night when I went to bed, I'd lay down in bed and I'd bring my ribs out and I would take a few deep breaths and just allow my belly to do its thing like that. And so I encourage you to do the same thing. Now, I'm also a cook, and I like to eat good food, and I spend a lot of time in the kitchen, which means I spend a lot of time in the grocery store. So the other place that I would make a conscious point of practicing this process, ribs out, belly plop, belly relaxed, was while I was pushing my grocery cart through the grocery store. That was just a trigger for me. Oh, pushing groceries, time to work on this. And it always worked for me, but you'll find your own. So that right there is the very first piece of it. Ribs out, belly relaxed, and now we move into the rest of the posture. Now, the way this looks is you want to be as if a filament is pulling you up to the top of the ceiling and your spine is nice and straight. So it's just like this. And you don't want your head up, you don't want it too far down, but most people have a tendency for their chin to kind of go up, like when they're posing for pictures or something. So you might want to tuck your chin just slightly as that filament is coming up from the top of your head, that imaginary filament to the ceiling, okay? So the next piece of it is you want your shoulders to be nice and relaxed with your arms just hanging naturally by their sides. Now, again, for many people in our culture, there's tension in the shoulders. So if you just take a minute or two, or just even a few seconds, and allow those shoulders to relax, you might notice that they come down like a half an inch, or even up to a full inch, to get those shoulders nice and relaxed, okay? So moving on down through the body, the next piece of it, because you do want that spine nice and straight, is to just slightly tuck your hips under. I don't know if you can see this or not, but because you don't want to be like sway backed and you don't want to be like concave like this, but you just slightly tuck those hip bones underneath. And then moving down to your knees, now you want to make sure your knees aren't locked because that can cause blood flow issues and you might get a little dizzy, and we don't want that. So make sure you can actually move a little bit like this so you know that your knees are not locked. Now, the next piece of it is you want your feet to be right about hips width apart, okay? So this is the posture that you want. And the whole time you're in this posture, remember your rib cage, check those handlebars there. That rib cage is out and expanded, and your belly is relaxed. Okay, now that we've completed the posture, we're going to move right on to onsets. Now, one thing I need to make clear about this, well, two things actually. One is that onset is the first sound that comes out of your mouth when you're starting a phrase, a sentence, a word. But the onsets that we're talking about here in this context are all words beginning with a vowel. Now, the reason for this is that words starting with a consonant kind of create their own sound because of the lips and the tongue and the teeth and the way that the mouth is formatting that sound, like t, s, f, k. Those all make their own sounds just so you can so that people can understand you because of the word that you're saying. But with onsets, it can be a little bit trickier. And with vowel sounds in onsets, it can be a little bit trickier. So where we want to start with this is with the vocal folds. The other word for this is vocal cords. I use the word vocal fold because that's what my teacher said. So the vocal folds should be nice and loose and vibrating as air moves through them. Now there's three kinds of onsets, and they're called glottal, aspirated, and coordinated. Now the glottal is one that is very common with a lot of people. It was very common with me when I started the vocal training. And what that means is that your vocal folds are kind of together, and when you go to make a sound, the air comes and forces them apart, and the sound comes out kind of like when you clear your throat like that, which is actually really hard on your vocal folds, or if you make like a it's like that. that kind of a sound that you can make on a vowel, and it forces those vocal folds open by the air. And it causes a harsh sound, but also it really irritates your vocal folds, which causes mucus, which causes you to clear your throat more. And this is all a situation that you just really don't want. We want to avoid those glottal sounds at all possible. They don't feel very good in your throat, and they don't sound very good to the ear. So you want to avoid, and what you really want is a coordinated onset with those vowel sounds. Now, the coordinated onset is almost like the air and the sound are coming out at exactly the same time. Nothing is forcing the folds open. The air is already flowing through them, and the vowel sound is coming right along like a needle pulling a thread. So as opposed to it would be ee, ah, oh, and such, okay? Now, kind of like with the belly and walking around with clenched abdominal muscles for years, it can take a little time to get to that point of a coordinated onset. And that's why we have what we call the aspirated onset. And what that is you simply put a little tiny H right at the beginning of that vowel sound. So while a coordinated onset might be oh, and aspirated would be ho, like that. You just put a little H at the beginning, and it really helps you move from that glottal onset into the coordinated onset, which is what you really want. Okay, so that's the postures and the onsets, and now we're going to move into resonance. Now, resonance is that quality in the voice where you might see someone who's standing in front of a 2,500 people audience on a big stage, and they don't have a microphone, but you can hear them all the way from the back of the room. Well, that's because their voice is in that resonance space, what we call the mask or the buzzy spot. It's right here, okay? If you get that piece of your vocal tract, get everything going right into that mask, your voice is going to carry. Now, I happen to be in a room with quite a lot of carpet in it, so you probably can't hear it real well. But you know how a lot of people like to sing in the shower, in the bathroom? See, that's the reason for that, is because there's not a lot of carpet, there's tile and glass and things like that. So the voice just kind of bounces off the surfaces, and it makes for much more resonance. So this is what we're aiming for, that same kind of sound that you sometimes get when you're in the shower singing, right? So there are basically, well, two ways, but really it's one best way to get yourself right into that resonance spot. And that is to warm up, say a few words, using words that begin with the letters M or N, because it kind of forces that voice right there into that mask, into that buzzy spot. So one word that we use with the Transformational Voice Institute is money. Money, money, money. You can just go like that, or you can say a nah and open your mouth real wide and let that nah sound. It'll bring you right here into the buzzy spot. So if you ever feel like you're losing a little bit of that resonance, or maybe you're a little off pitch, or you're having trouble going between registers, which is really not a part of this class, but getting that resonant spot back is what's really going to help you. So remember those M words and those N words, okay? And that brings us to the very last piece of this, which is pitch. And this is very important when it comes to speaking in your authentic voice, because for reasons that I don't understand, and my teacher really doesn't understand either, a lot of people tend to speak in a pitch that is just a little bit lower than their voice really wants to go. I don't know why so many people do this, but a lot of people do. I suspect, honestly, it has something to do with wanting to hold back, to not fully be heard, to kind of blend in with the crowd. But this is very common in our culture. And when you are in the situation of the cycle of breath-based vocalization and all of those other pieces are in place, if your ribs are out, your belly is relaxed, you're in proper posture, and you're resonant, that pitch is not going to be a problem. It's going to come to you very, very naturally. So that is the last piece of this. The ribs, the belly, the posture, the onsets, the resonance, and the pitch. And this is your first action step. I would like you to pay close attention to these vocal tips. Try and do it at least once a day when you go to bed at night, for the ribs out and the belly relaxed. And whenever you think of it, pay attention to your onsets, your resonance, and your pitch, all of which will get you speaking in your authentic voice.
Because nobody's like you.